There are moments in life when you suddenly realize you no longer know where you're going. On the surface, everything still looks the same. Your routines haven't changed. The people around you are the same. Your life appears intact. But deep inside, something feels off. Conversations that once energized you now feel empty. Goals that used to excite you suddenly seem pointless. You're still living, still functioning, but you no longer feel alive. And then, on an ordinary day, you stumble across a video, a book, or a single line in a quote that makes your chest tighten. You don't know why. You can't logically explain it. It just feels like it arrived exactly when you needed it. According to Jung, this is no accident. He called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence. When the soul is ready, life responds. When you've reached the limit of the old way of being, what you need to awaken will find you at the precise moment you're ready to receive it. This video is not here to teach you something new. It's here to awaken something you've always known but forgotten. Because the things that truly change us rarely arrive with noise. They come quietly when you feel like you have nothing left to hold on to. You don't think it. You feel it deep in your chest. This is what I needed to hear right now. Maybe it's not that you found this video. Maybe it found you. And the real question is this. Are you ready to let your heart open and receive what's waiting for you? Number 1. When the shell begins to crack, the first sign of awakening often arrives in the quietest way. There's no disaster, no dramatic loss. Just a normal morning. You wake up, look around your familiar room, and suddenly feel something unsettling. A realization you can't ignore anymore. I can't keep living like this. Everything looks the same as yesterday. Your job, your relationships, the roles you've learned to play. But inside there's a tiny crack, almost inaudible, as if your soul is whispering, enough. Jung called this the beginning of individuation. The moment when the soul refuses to keep living behind the mask it once built to be accepted. When that outer shell begins to crack, something inside you splits. One part clings to the persona, the good one, the strong one, the one who has it together. The other part, the real one, just wants to breathe, to live honestly. At first, this crack is terrifying. You start asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why does everything suddenly feel meaningless? But that discomfort is not a sign that life is falling apart. It's a sign that your soul is waking up. Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." Most of us live in a false stability, predictable routines, polite conversations, repeated habits that make us believe we're fine, while deep down the soul is slowly suffocating. The cracking isn't a tragedy, it's truth trying to be born. When the soul reaches a point where it can no longer tolerate falseness, the old structure must crumble so something real can emerge, like a seed in the ground. Before it can grow, it must split its own shell. From the outside, it looks like breaking. From the inside, it's life beginning. Most people are afraid of this stage, so they numb it. They rush to patch the crack with distractions, a new job, a new relationship, endless scrolling, temporary pleasures. But the more they try to fill the emptiness, the wider it grows. Because what needs to be heard isn't out there, it's within. I once sat in a small sharing circle where a woman told her story. For years, she was known as the strong one. She carried everything. Work, family, responsibility. She never complained. One evening, riding her bike home, she suddenly stopped in the middle of the street and burst into tears. There was no clear reason, just an overwhelming feeling, I can't keep doing this. At the time, she thought she was breaking down. But looking back, she said that was the day her life truly began. From that moment, she learned to say no, to rest, to look at herself not with judgment, but with honesty. The day her shell cracked was the day her soul reclaimed its authority. This stage forces you to confront a question you've avoided for a long time. Who am I when I'm no longer playing this role? Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Awakening isn't a flash of light in the sky. It's a subtle ache in the soul, the pain of birth. You start feeling uncomfortable with a life that once satisfied you. Old joys lose their flavor. Everything seems fine, but you are not. That discomfort is the first sign of awakening. Don't run from it. Don't rush to return to how things were, because how things were is exactly what your soul is trying to outgrow. Let the crack exist. Observe it. Listen to it. Because beneath that breaking surface, a truer version of you is forming. Collapse is not the end. It's the signal of a beginning. When the shell breaks, it doesn't mean you're losing everything. It means you're being given the chance to finally become yourself. And if you're in that blurry, quiet place right now where everything feels empty and uncertain, know this: you are not alone. This is the moment your soul is calling you home. If you feel that crack inside you, leave one word in the comments: I see. Because the moment you acknowledge it, awakening has already begun. Number 2, when the soul begins to speak. After the shell cracks, a new phase unfolds. Not loudly, but in a silence so deep it can feel unsettling. On the outside, life continues. You go to work, you smile, you keep up appearances, but inside something has shifted. A faint inner voice emerges, weak but persistent, like a memory you can't quite place. At first, you don't understand it. It shows up as exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. A strange sense of disconnection in a life that looks stable. You look around and realize everything is intact except you. There's an emptiness you can't name, as if you're living someone else's life. Jung called this the uprising of the unconscious. The buried parts of the psyche begin demanding to be seen. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in through dreams, moods, quiet dissatisfaction. Sometimes you catch your reflection and notice something different in your eyes. Not sadness, awareness. Many people think they're breaking down at this stage. Jung saw it differently. It's not pathology, it's transformation. When the unconscious wants change and the conscious mind clings to the old, tension arises. That tension is the energy of growth. Ignore it and it finds other ways out. Fatigue, anxiety, depression, events that force you to stop. What looks like loss is often the soul's language, and this is where we'll continue. At this stage, you begin to feel something you can't unsee anymore. The gap between your outer life and your inner truth. Your routines still run. Your calendar still fills up. Your responsibilities still demand your attention. But the energy behind it all has changed. What used to feel normal now feels heavy. What used to feel safe now feels tight, like clothing you've outgrown. And the confusing part is this: nothing bad has to happen for you to feel this way. Life can look stable, even successful, and yet you feel detached, restless, like you're watching yourself live from a distance. That's when you start realizing the soul doesn't scream first, it whispers. And if you keep ignoring the whisper, it gets louder. Jung described this as the unconscious pushing upward, not to ruin you, but to rebalance you. Because when you live too long in a role that isn't truly yours, the psyche eventually revolts. Not with chaos at first, but with numbness, with silence, with that haunting feeling of, is this all? Sometimes the soul speaks through dreams. Sometimes it speaks through sudden tears for no clear reason. Sometimes it speaks through irritability, or the urge to pull away from people you once tried so hard to impress. And sometimes it speaks through synchronicity. Jung called synchronicity the meaningful alignment of inner and outer worlds. A line in a book hits you like a punch. A stranger says exactly what you needed to hear. A video appears at the exact moment you feel like you're about to give up. These things feel random to the logical mind, but to the soul they are signals, messages. A quiet tap on the shoulder saying, look, listen, wake up. I once heard a story about a woman who had everything she thought she wanted. An ideal job, a happy marriage, financial comfort. She was the person everyone envied, and yet she began to sink into a depression so deep she couldn't understand it. Each morning she woke up with a hollow feeling like she had no reason to be alive. She thought something was wrong with her. So she tried to fix it the way modern life teaches us to fix everything. More productivity, more positivity, more gratitude. But it didn't work. And then she started writing down her dreams. Night after night, the same image returned. She was wandering through a massive house, room after room, unable to find the door out. In Jungian terms, the house was her ego, her constructed identity. And the missing door was her forgotten soul. Her depression wasn't an enemy. It was a call, an invitation to return home. Jung called this the call of the self. Not the ego self, the me you present to the world, but the deeper self, the totality of who you are. The self doesn't speak in neat sentences. It speaks through symbols, feelings, coincidences, and pain. Because the truth is, the soul doesn't care if you understand, it cares if you return. And once you begin hearing that call, it leads you into something most people misunderstand. Number 3, the truth about suffering. It's not failure, it's a threshold. When the voice of the soul grows strong enough, it doesn't just want to be heard, it wants to be felt. And that's when pain shows up. Not to punish you, but to open the path. Because before anyone enters a deeper awakening, they pass through a gate. And that gate is suffering. We were raised to fear pain. From childhood, we're trained to avoid negative emotions. Don't be sad, don't be angry, don't cry, don't be weak. The modern world glorifies happiness as the default state and treats suffering like a defect that needs to be removed. But Jung warned that the avoidance of pain is exactly what disconnects you from your soul. For Jung, suffering is not proof that you're failing. It's proof that something inside you is ready to evolve. When the false layers start dissolving, the psyche goes through an intentional disintegration. Painful, yes, but necessary. Like a sculptor chiseling away what doesn't belong, revealing what was hidden underneath. A female painter once shared something that stayed with me. She spent years chasing perfection. Every piece had to impress, every brushstroke had to prove something. And then suddenly she hit a creative crisis. She couldn't paint at all, not because she lost skill, but because she lost meaning. Colors were right in front of her, but she couldn't feel them. Every attempt only deepened the emptiness, so she stopped forcing it. She let herself feel the pain and confusion fully. And after weeks of silence, she began painting again, not for an audience, not for approval, but for herself. And for the first time in years, she felt life returning in every stroke. She said, "Pain didn't destroy me. It stripped away the false so I could return to what's real." Jung wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." In other words, when people refuse to consciously walk through pain, it doesn't disappear. It turns into anxiety, addiction, depression, numbness, repetitive cycles. But when you face it, when you allow it, suffering becomes the fire that burns away what no longer fits. This is where awakening becomes real, because it forces you to meet the parts of yourself you avoided. Buried memories, repressed anger, old grief. The wounds you pretended were over, the parts of you you labeled unacceptable. Jung called this shadow work not as a trendy phrase, but as a spiritual necessity. Because the shadow is not evil, it's simply what you haven't made conscious yet. Jung wrote to a student, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That darkness is not your enemy. It's the part of you that hasn't been loved. And when you finally stop running, something strange happens. The pain starts changing shape. It stops being a prison and becomes a doorway. Light and shadow inside you begin to speak to each other instead of fighting. Jung called this integration, the merging of opposites within the psyche. You stop dividing yourself into good and bad, and you begin to become whole. This is why mythology speaks in symbols, because the soul understands symbols better than logic. Jung often referenced myths because they mirror psychological truth. Take Prometheus, for example. He steals fire from the gods, the symbol of consciousness, and gives it to humanity. For that, he's chained to a rock, and every day an eagle devours his liver. Every night it regenerates and the cycle repeats. It looks like punishment, but it's also awakening. To gain fire, to gain consciousness, you endure suffering. But you are not destroyed by it. You are expanded by it. Destruction and rebirth, again and again. That's the initiation of the soul, because no one enters a new life without dying to an old one. That death isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the death of an identity, a belief, a role, a version of you that kept you safe but small. And if you're in that stage right now, where everything feels like it's falling apart inside, where you feel alone, uncertain, like you can't recognize yourself anymore, remember this. Pain doesn't come to shrink you. It comes to open you. It removes what isn't true so you can touch what is. Look back at your life. How many moments once felt like endings but later revealed themselves as redirections? How many losses eventually became freedom? Suffering, when seen through the eyes of the soul, always carries a hidden order. So if you're standing in a storm, don't just beg for it to end. Stand still long enough to hear what it's trying to say. Behind every thunderclap is the soul whispering, you are standing at the threshold. And when you cross that threshold, something changes permanently. Number 4, awakening from the crowd. After you've been through that gate of pain, you realize you can't go back. The things that once excited you, status, approval, small talk, chasing attention, begin to feel distant. Not because you hate them, but because you see them clearly now. You see that much of what you chased wasn't truly yours. It was inherited, programmed, absorbed from the crowd. Jung warned, the larger the crowd, the more negligible the individual. He believed the disease of modernity wasn't chaos, it was conformity. When people lose their inner voice and start thinking and feeling as the collective does, they stop asking, is this true for me? And start asking, what will others think? And when your soul awakens, conformity becomes suffocating. You start feeling like a stranger in places that used to feel normal. Conversations feel scripted. Goals feel borrowed. Relationships feel polite but shallow. You don't necessarily want to judge anyone, but you can't pretend anymore. You're standing between two worlds, the world of external noise and the world of inner silence. And if you stay in that silence long enough, something will happen. You will start hearing your own voice again. Imagine a bird that has always flown in a flock. It feels safe following the group. It never questions direction. But one day, a strange instinct calls it toward a different sky. It trembles, afraid, longing to return to the familiar. But the old sky is too small now. When it finally leaves, the first thing it meets is loneliness. That loneliness isn't punishment, it's space for the soul to expand. Jung called this the crisis of separation. You no longer resonate with what was once normal. You may feel lost, but that lostness is proof that individuality is forming. Only when you are no longer pulled by the gravity of the crowd can you discover your true center. And this is where we'll go next. Because once you leave the crowd, the hardest part begins, leaving the false version of yourself. Number 5, the fearful leap from pretending to being real. After the soul steps away from the crowd, it may feel like freedom. But that freedom is only the doorway. Because the hardest part of awakening is not leaving others. It's leaving the false version of yourself. This is the point where the journey demands a leap. Not a physical leap, but a psychic one. Carl Jung called it the inner decision. The moment you say, I will no longer live a lie. And even though those words sound simple, this is one of the most terrifying moments in a human life, because the old self does not release its grip easily. It comes back with fear, logic, habits, and the illusion of safety. It whispers, if you live honestly, you'll lose people. If you stop pretending, everything will fall apart. If you choose yourself, you'll be alone. And for a long time, that voice has kept you obedient. But now the soul no longer listens. The soul, no. Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you truly face yourself, you don't just see the light. You see the shadow, the selfishness, the anger, the wounds, the parts of you buried under masks of goodness and control. Truth is never comfortable, but it is always liberating. Modern neuroscience now confirms what Jung intuited long ago. When you confront truth and stop repeating old defensive patterns, the brain begins to rewire itself. Old neural pathways tied to fear and self-protection weaken, while new ones linked to awareness and creativity form. In other words, when you live truthfully, your nervous system changes, your mind changes, your life changes. But before rebirth, there is always the in-between. This is the corridor between two selves. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. Relationships begin to shift. Work feels wrong, beliefs collapse. You may feel empty, directionless, even frightened. But in that emptiness, something essential happens. The soul begins to breathe, begins to. Jung compared this stage to facing the inner dragon. The dragon represents fear, resistance, and everything guarding your deepest truth. The dragon is not your enemy. It protects your treasure. It only roars when you approach what matters most. Most people turn back here. They retreat into old habits, old roles, old comforts. But those who stay discover something unexpected. The dragon only burns when you run. When you stand still and face it, it becomes light. A close friend once shared her story with me. For years in her marriage, she tried to be the perfect partner. Gentle, understanding, always accommodating. Not because she wanted to, but because she was terrified of being abandoned. She smiled while her heart broke, stayed silent when hurt, carried the burden of harmony alone. One evening, while setting the dinner table, she dropped her chopsticks and started crying. Not because of a fight, not because of betrayal, but because a single thought rose up and shattered everything. I don't know who I am anymore. That moment changed her life. She began saying no. She allowed herself to rest, to read, to walk, to be quiet without guilt. People said she had changed, and she had. She was no longer performing. She was living. One day, her husband looked at her and said, "You're different, but you seem more alive." She smiled and replied, "I'm not different. I'm just not afraid anymore." That is the leap Jung spoke of. The leap from fear to honesty, from pretending to being real. It's never easy, but the soul was never meant to be safe. It was meant to be true. If you feel fear here, it doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It means you're at the doorway. Fear is not a stop sign. It's a guardian asking, are you ready to let go of who you were? Like a climber releasing a lower ledge to reach a higher one. The moment of letting go feels like falling. But without that release, there is no ascent. If this resonates, let that be a quiet vow to yourself. You will no longer shrink to fit. You will no longer pretend to be okay. You will move toward what is real. Number 6, no one is coming to save you. This is the moment the soul stops waiting. No teacher, no savior, no book, no video can walk the path for you. They can point, they can remind, but the crossing is yours alone. Jung said, no one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life. This is the essence of individuation, the loneliest and most necessary journey of all. After leaving the crowd, many people fall into a subtler illusion. Someone will show me the way. But that is just the savior archetype in disguise, the inner child still waiting for rescue, still hoping someone will arrive and make everything okay. Jung warned that if we don't recognize this pattern, it will quietly run our adult lives. We look for the savior in relationships, someone who makes us feel whole. We look for it in success, a title that gives us worth. We look for it in spirituality, a guru, a method, a belief that promises enlightenment. But the paradox is this: the more you wait to be saved, the more powerless you feel. A woman once shared in Jungian therapy that after her divorce, she devoured self-help books, workshops, and practices. She was always searching for the next answer, the next breakthrough. And one day, exhausted, she broke down and realized, no one can walk into me, I have to do this myself. That realization changed everything. She stopped searching outward and began listening inward. Journaling, sitting in silence, asking herself honest questions. Months later, she didn't feel fixed. She felt grounded, peaceful, real. Jung called this radical responsibility. Not blaming yourself for everything, but owning your life fully. You may not have caused your wounds, but you are responsible for healing them. You cannot control circumstances, but you can refuse to let them define you. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung said, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. True responsibility is realizing that destiny is shaped by what you are willing to see within yourself. When you stop waiting to be saved, resentment fades. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is this showing me? Pain becomes information. Loss becomes direction. Life stops happening to you and starts unfolding through you. Number 7, when you stop searching, you become what you were searching for. After the cracking, the crisis, the suffering, the separation, the leap, and the responsibility, something quiet and miraculous occurs. You stop searching, not because you found everything, but because you realized nothing was missing. Jung called this the realization of the self, the union of consciousness and unconsciousness, light and shadow. There is no longer a war between who you should be and who you are. The struggle softens, the noise fades. You don't chase happiness anymore. You experience it. You don't seek purpose. Everything you do carries meaning. The past still exists, but it no longer controls you. The people who hurt you are still part of your story, but resentment dissolves into understanding. The destination was never ahead of you. It was always here, in this breath, this moment, this presence. Someone once wrote that after years of searching for peace across books, retreats, and distant places, she sat one morning on her porch drinking tea, watching sunlight move across the floor, and suddenly understood. She had traveled the world looking for something that had never left her. From that day on, her life became simple, and in that simplicity sacred. This is integration. When life itself becomes meditation, when you no longer separate the spiritual from the ordinary, when presence replaces striving. Awakening doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives in the quiet realization that you are finally ready to live without running, without pretending, without abandoning yourself. If you've reached this point, perhaps this video didn't come to awaken you. It came to remind you that you already are. Nothing was ever random. Every loss, every meeting, every moment of confusion was life whispering, it's time. Time to stop, to listen, to return inward. You were never lost. You are always on your way home.